The Nintendo 64 was an amazing console. It's one that many people like myself are still collecting for today as we desperately try to relive the simple joys of our childhood. But as beloved as the console is and as successful as it was, it doesn't have the biggest library of games. Sure, there are plenty of good times to be had with its nearly 400 titles, but it's a far cry from the thousands of games that were released for the PS1. Heck, even the Sega Saturn had over 1,000 games and it was considered to be a financial failure. Since I have no life and an unrelenting desire to create compelling content, I've decided to play and review all 393 licensed N64 games in this new series. We may even take a look at some unreleased prototypes down the road. Now, this simply wouldn't be possible without emulation, and I don't have thousands of hours to try and complete every game, but I'll do my best. If this sounds good to you, stick around as we take a look at every single N64 game in alphabetical order. We're kicking things off today with the games that have numerical titles. I hope you enjoy it. 64 de Hakken, Tamagotchi, Mina de Tamagotchi World. Remember Tamagotchi? There were those little virtual pets that were popular in the 90s. Well, in Japan there was a Tamagotchi game on the Nintendo 64. It's a 4-player Mario Party style board game with mini-games, and a lot of poop. I mean, there's even a mini-game that involves throwing poop at other players. To be honest, I can't give this much of a review because I had very little idea of what was going on when I was playing it. You roll dice, feed your Tamagotchi, punch it when it refuses to eat. I don't know. The graphics are cute and the music is undeniably cheerful. The minigames were just okay when I understood how to play them. But unless you can read Japanese or have a ton of patience to figure out how the game works, you're better off playing Mario Party. 64 Hanafuda, Tenchi no Yakusoku. Alright, another game I don't know how to play. It gets better after this, I promise. 64 Hanafuda is some sort of Japanese card game, and that's about all I can say about it. It has a story mode and voice acting, which is nice, but man, some of those characters just look creepy. I managed to BS my way through the first level and gave up on the second. Like I said, I have no idea how to play this game. But if you're looking for a Hanafuda game for the N64, then this one's probably for you. 64 Ozumo. 64 Ozumo is a sumo wrestling simulator. You get to pick one of several sumo wrestlers, each with their own strengths, and embark on your career. The game is entirely in Japanese, so I missed out on most of the story, but I can't deny its charm. Just look at those cute little chunky characters. You can mostly get by following on-screen prompts and mashing the C buttons like crazy. If you lose a match, it's not game over. You simply move to the next match and try to win as many as you can throughout your career. Between matches, you'll be treated to some cutscenes where your character is either being scolded by his trainer, going out with his girlfriend, or slapping kids out of trees. At least that's what I think because I couldn't understand the dialogue. It's still fun to watch at least. There are also several mini-games thrown into the mix such as eating and fishing. I wish I understood the story because it has a ton of charm, but if you want to skip the story altogether, you can always hop into a quick match against the CPU or another player. Even as a Westerner who doesn't understand much Japanese, 64 Ozumo is simple enough to get some moderate kicks out of. 64 Ozumo 2. 64 Ozumo 2 is, you guessed it, the sequel to 64 Ozumo. Man, am I good at writing these things or what? My time with this one was limited due to some issues with emulating the game, not to mention my lack of understanding Japanese. But here's what I noticed. Once again, you have a nice story/simulation mode, and it seems to have more depth this time around. You can actually customize your character in a lot of ways, from attributes to looks. And you can make some hilariously creepy looking characters. The cutscenes seem to have a lot more going on this time with more characters and some nice facial animations. Gameplay is largely the same, but I found myself mashing buttons with much worse results this time around. Surely I'm missing something here. Like I said, I wasn't able to spend too much time with this one, but it seems like a worthy follow-up for fans of the original. 64 Trump Collection, Alice no Waku Waku Trump World. We'll get to 1080 snowboarding in a minute, but first I have to talk about another card game. Actually, this one's interesting. It's actually a collection of at least 16 card games set in the world of Alice in Wonderland. Once again, everything is in Japanese, but at least some of these games will be familiar to Western audiences, and most of them are simple enough to figure out anyway. I was just happy to see Speed. I had a bit of fun with that one. You can play through the game's story mode, which sees Alice going through Wonderland, or Trump World I guess, and challenging a bunch of classic characters from the story to various card games. Or you can simply jump into a card game of your choice, either solo, against NPCs, or up to 3 other human players. The graphics are colorful and charming with a Paper Mario-like aesthetic. The music is cheerful and fun, and there's a nice amount of voice acting. For a few of the games though, the bright cartoon theme goes out the window altogether. I think they just got lazy designing the poker game. Solitaire, on the other hand, features a really smooth, calming jazz soundtrack and chill vibes. Really, this game is not nearly as bad as I had imagined. I spent much more time with it than I expected I would. The question I still have though is this: does anyone actually want to play cards on N64? Well, if so, you should check out this game. You'd probably be better off picking up a deck of cards and playing with friends in real life, but this really isn't a bad option either. The AI can be a little unfair on some of the games, allowing the CPU to be a little too lucky. But overall, it's a well-made game, coincidentally from the same developers behind the Ozumo games. Last but certainly not least is 1080 Snowboarding. 1080 Snowboarding was a first-party Nintendo game produced by the legendary Shigeru Miyamoto. It was intended to really show off both the power of the N64 console and the functionality of its unusual controller. But if you're expecting SSX or Snowboard Kids, this is not it. 1080 Snowboarding went for a more realistic approach to the snowboarding genre, an unusual choice for a first-party Nintendo game. Tricks are complicated to pull off, and even just staying upright on your board can be a challenge. There are 2 basic game modes, Match Race and Trick Attack. In Match Race, you enter a series of downhill races against computer opponents. Each set of races gets harder than the last, with more difficult terrains and more competent opponents. In Trick Attack, you simply try to obtain the highest score by pulling off the best tricks. You can choose from the usual downhill maps or opt for the half pipe, which is always fun. In addition, there's a contest mode which presents a number of challenges, like racing against the clock while maneuvering between pylons. Every time you miss a pylon, you lose time. There's also a 2-player mode that lets you race against friends. Like I said earlier, this doesn't feel like a typical snowboarding game. There's a pretty steep learning curve. I still can't figure out how to do a 1080. But for the race modes, you'll want to avoid ramps and tricks as much as possible anyway, since they only slow you down. For what it is, it's an interesting game and probably one of the better looking titles on the N64. It rewards focus and practice. Beginners might be put off by the initial difficulty, but give it a chance and I think you'll love it. Those are all of the N64 titles that begin with numbers. This was a short video, but we have so much more to cover in the future. Next time we'll be checking out every game that starts with the letter A. If you don't want to miss out on the rest of the series, be sure to hit that subscribe button and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.